Super Progressive, what is good? Just such a special episode today for two reasons. First of all, on the Super Progressive podcast, we have, you may notice that it's been taken up a level, and that's because of our brand new co-host, Ruben from Colombia, bro. Ruben,
hey,
how are you doing? You guys might know him from the Linear podcast that he does. He leaves amazing comments on the Super Progressive channels. And now he's the co-host of the podcast, bro. Thank you so much for all the work behind the scenes you've been doing, and welcome aboard, man.
Hey, it's an awesome pleasure. It's an honor, and I can't believe I'm just doing this now. So it's my new point in life. And thank you very much.
And now this episode is special additionally because of our amazing guest today. We've been featuring more and more legendary producers. And today on Super Progressive, we have like an absolute treat. Now, today joining us will be Chris Scott. And you may know his productions because they've been on the forefront of the progressive sound that we explore on Super Progressive. You may recognize him from Lexicon Avenue, and you may recognize him from Echomen, or you may recognize him as the lead man of Forensic Records. But through it all, and Ruben can add a little bit more right here, but man, we're just so stoked for you to be on the podcast today and to hear stories about all of this.
Chris has so many aliases.
Yeah, there's so many aliases.
Oh, man. You know, I was asked to make a list, and then there's some ones that I've even forgotten about, like one-offs, you know, that I've even forgotten about. And there's friends of mine like Darren Drake. He's like, you did this. And I'm like, oh, yeah, I did do that, you know?
Yeah, it's like Little Green Man, Mooncat.
Little Green Man and Mooncat, they were big ones and stuff. And I think, you know, Lexicon and Echomen, they're the ones that sort of put us on the map and took us around the world playing. And, you know, I'm really grateful for it. But we did try and push the boundaries of what we started off with, because we were getting into this whole thing with a tougher beat from the deep house stuff, and we just had our own take on it. So it kind of, so the sort of melodic harking back to the 80s sound was the Echomen stuff, and the tougher, more sort of tribal influence, I think that John Digweed started playing that we did was the Lexicon sound. So we had I had the two different things. I was producing with Anton for one, and I was producing with Scott and Mark for the Lexicon. And, you know, it just kind of took off. It was a bit of a whirlwind, really.
It was. I got to listen to it and play it a lot. You should have seen everybody just going crazy here in Colombia, where I'm at. It was really global. It's fantastic. It was such an honor and a pleasure to play all of those tracks.
Thank you. Thanks very much.
You know, one thing I failed to mention in my intro that I'm also excited for us to be talking about is not only there's the work as Lexicon Avenue and Echomen for your own productions, but your remix work too for all these different DJs. And I think what I'm excited to hear in this interview is, you know, how all these different DJs that kind of had all their different sounds chose to showcase your records on their mixed compilations and in the clubs. And I just can't wait to get into it all. But we got to go back to the beginning, bro, because like you don't just start creating legendary progressive house tracks. It all starts somewhere. So like, where does your story with music begin?
Well, it's crazy. You kind of I mean, how far back do you want to go? But
as way back as you can.
I went to comprehensive school. I'm going to lower my seat here. I went to comprehensive school and like I really only connected with a couple of guys who were into the same electronic music as me. One of them became an act in the UK called Zero B. Now he was big in the rave scene, and we started producing together. We started sort of making sounds together, basically. And I had like Saturday jobs and pocket money and stuff like this that kind of I would just keep saving and buy little bits of equipment. And electronic equipment in the sort of mid-'80s was starting to go really cheap. So we would buy stuff and we would learn it, and then we would jam together. And anyway, he became like a big rave act in the UK, and I was just messing around, and then, you know, I started doing this radio show, like an underground radio show in sort of 1989, 1990, and I wasn't ready. I was just throwing sounds together. I just didn't have, and I was kind of getting wasted a lot. And, you know, I thought, I had this epiphany where I was at this place. I was on stage, and I shouldn't have been on stage. I wasn't ready for it. And it just went down, like it just bombed. And at that point, I thought, you know, this was like 1991. I thought, look, if you're either going to do this properly, you know, I was like a kid. You're either going to do this properly or you're not going to do it at all. So make a choice. And I just stopped getting wasted and learned the skills, and I took shitty jobs to buy very expensive equipment. And I just threw myself into like being this hermit that would, you know, find out everything about. And like, so I would hear tracks. I would put my friend had his 1210s in my room at this shared flat, and I would put this track on, and I would listen to my music and go, well, why doesn't mine sound like that? And I would just try and refine my sound. And within like a year, I had my first record out. So so that's when I started taking it seriously. And after my first record, people started wanting to work with me, collaborate, and it just sort of, it kind of built from there. And then 3 years later, I was in the national charts in the UK, you know.
And how difficult was it back then to get like your records pressed? Because it's not like today, like everybody just has a DAW and there are a lot of distributors.
Well, everything from a technical point of view, everything back then, I mean, I started off with an Atari ST. And, you know, I had like an expander on it, which gave me 4 MIDI outs, and I had one Akai sampler, one Cog synth, one Roland synth, and they're all going into this shitty little mixer. Sorry for my language, but and it just, you know, you had to. The good thing about it was you would learn your instruments. You know, you would learn them inside out. So you would learn the sampler inside out, and by today's terms, all of the equipment back then, by today's standards, was very basic, but very difficult because you're working on these tiny little screens and you're working out analog, and it ended up being quite expensive. So you had time before you get your next thing. Nowadays, producers just immediately have, with the digital audio workstation, they have everything straight away. Now, we had to sort of invest and spend time and like make some money and buy another piece of equipment, you know, just a tiny compressor, you know, and these things are on every channel of a DAW. So it was a different time. It was a different time, but, you know, the good thing about it was that you learned every part of the process rather than just having all this stuff in front of you. And I'm not taking anything away from, because there's some great new producers out there, but they never had to learn each and purchase each little bit of equipment like a sampler or an analog synth, and you have the time to learn it because you have, you know, a long time to wait until you have enough money to buy your next piece of equipment, you know. So it's like that's how it kind of progressed, and obviously with the collaborations, we ended up pushing each other on to sort of be better on every track, and
nice,
yeah, and that's kind of how it sort of unfolded. Time. I've got to turn this alarm. I set an alarm on my phone to say that I'm talking to you guys, and it is going off. So yeah, I'm back to you now. Yeah,
don't worry. No, but the good thing I can imagine is that you got to learn a lot from all these friends that you're collaborating with, and everybody kind of like shared the knowledge and the connections, I can imagine.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. I mean, I worked with mainly DJs and, only DJs really, not other producers from the start of having records out. So what they brought to the table was, well, they would put a record on and say, well, this is what works on the dance floor. And I'd go, well, what about this? And I would make something and they go, yeah. Like that. Have you heard this? And I think, with progressive house, I think that's the way it's gone. I think everyone has just taken the ideas from things and from other people's tracks and gone, oh, I like the way that kick drum sounds, or oh, I like the way that sounds, and everyone has just sort of built upon it over time. And we used to put on records that we thought would inspire us in a studio session. Now, you're not copying them. You're just saying, have you heard this? And shit, yeah, that's really good. How can I be that good? And I remember having a conversation with John Creamer and Stefan K about this. And like when Lexicon started building up, and we said, look, we have to admit, before we start a session, we put your records on. He said, oh, shit. And he said to me, they said to us, oh, shit, we do that with your records. So they used to put on Lexicon Avenue records, and we used to put on Creamer and K records. And then in the end, we ended up doing remixes for each other,
Yeah, but the good thing is that if you listen to the progression of the tracks during the time, now that you're telling us this, you can see how every then it kept on escalating as in the progressive sound. And getting better in the production.
Getting better in production as well. And you've got to remember that not only did that's time as well, and that's technology moving on. If you listen to some of the productions back then, and they were limited to the medium as well, so they had to be. So if you put a track on now from back then, you say, oh, that's a great track, but it's in a sort of narrower field where now people are producing in the digital era. It's, you've got so much more scope, not just because of the technology, but because of the medium it's going out on. I mean, digital has a higher band, like a higher frequency range to work within. Whereas when it goes to vinyl, there's certain limitations with regards to bass and with regards to the tops, they had to be pulled down and in. So that's why if you listen to something from sort of 2003, it won't sound sonically as bright or as deep as something from as something now in 2023 has, more bandwidth, more basically sonically, more depth, because the medium of vinyl required that you couldn't have so much width, so much bass, so much top, and the sounds naturally progressed as the technologies progressed, but also as the mediums progressed. Everything's in digital now, which it gives you more scope. So
well, and a lot of things had to be mono. So before,
exactly. Well, you had mono below. I mean, literally, like below a certain frequency, like I think like around 100 hertz. If you had anything in stereo in the bass end of your track, the needle, like if you press that, the needle would literally jump out of the record. So it would be an unplayable record because of the medium. So you had a limited. So if you listen to things, they sound a lot narrower, anyone's tracks from back then on vinyl than they do now, because we live in a digital world. But I mean, going back to that sort of thing, I mean, we as artists were inspired with the kind of forward-thinking sounds of Danny Tenaglia, really back at those times, 96, 97. We actually ended up doing for DMC a remix of Look Ahead by Danny. And he just had this whole, we were kind of in awe of that whole Twilo, that whole New York sound that was just so much different to anything else you'd heard. And we sort of incorporated that, but with our own, coming from a deep house background into a tougher sort of beat scenario than we did with the deep house. And I think if you're looking for inspiration from, transitioning from the deeper house to the progressive, I think Danny Tenaglia, I think for everyone,
definitely.
of my age group was the guy to sort of go, wow, what's he going to do next? Yeah.
It's so cool to hear. I mean, it's funny because my next question was going to be how you're immersing yourself in the hardware and the technology and the music making process. But what were the sounds that you were inspired by to go and create music? And it's that DT sound you just answered.
Yeah, the DT sound. When when the whole tribal sound came out, we were like, wow, you had the US tribal label and you had the tribal over here, the European ones. The DJ Vibe was really tearing it up. But I think
the DJ Vibe was like the European Danny Tenaglia.
Yeah. We played with him in Portugal a few times. Like he was like a don in Europe of the sound, and those guys really pushed it forward. I think from the point of view of like throwing things into tracks and making it cohesive, but unlike anything you'd ever heard before, and what we really loved about Danny was the fact that he could like have this really tough sound and have these great noises coming in, but then have a lot of soulful stuff in there, like really soulful vocals would just come out of nowhere in amongst all this darkness, just different. It was just like, wow, yeah, this is new,
I totally get you. Definitely. It's a mind-blowing kind of thing. It changes your life.
Yeah, it really was. It did for us. It did for us in the studio. It did for us in in like moving forward and pushing ourselves to try to go darker, but at the same time, try to be uplifting. Dark and uplifting is quite a combination if you get it right.
No, well, the one of the cool things that I've been talking to Will is how your sound got to manage both of those things, but in different instances, and that was what I think was really, really interesting about the whole Chris Scott sound, that it's like, okay, there's Lexicon Avenue over here. It's like this kind of tribal in the background, but progressive in a sense of a forward thing with some darkness and a little bit of light. Then there's this Echomen sound that is just like soap pop and the kind of track that you want to put in this in that moment of the night where everybody's just gonna throw their hands in the air like, oh my God, it's so lovely.
I think definitely the Lexicon sound was more influenced by Danny's sort of tribal approach to things. I think more the Echomen sound was more our backgrounds in the 80s kind of sound, so the melodies, although, can be construed as being uplifting, they were quite melancholic as well. They could be quite dark in themselves, the melodies, but also, uplifting. It's a hard one to get. It's kind of looking for those notes. When you get a nice pad, for me, it was kind of looking for those notes that just didn't quite, they weren't the convention that would be sitting within that melody range, and just do something that might put a lump in your throat, might make you think, oh yeah, but at the same time be a little bit melancholic. And I tried to do that when I wrote the vocals for Perpetual and
oh my God, my favorite. It's like my favorite track. I played it so many times.
Thank you so much. Thanks so much. Yeah, and I think that was mainly about. I mean, you're in different points of your life, and for me, I mean, there's only like 8 lines in it, but I think trying to condense how you're feeling into those 8 lines to make it not such a challenging thing for people to hear on the dance floor. I think that was quite a difficult thing for me to achieve, but at the same time, it simplified the production process. But that in particular was about what I was going through personally at the time, which was a relationship which was in meltdown, and you try to, not say, hey, I'm in a relationship that's in a meltdown. You try to put it into, other words and it seemed to work. It seemed to resonate with people. So yeah, I was happy about that.
Take your heart out of the darkness. It's just a,
yeah.
I wanted to let you know, man, like even before I even thought of, even before super progressive, this channel was a thing. When I was just first falling in love with progressive house music over the pandemic, it was Perpetual, bro, that I turned to. That was my reference track. It's like, what is other music that sounds like this?
Yeah.
This balance of all this different stuff going on. It's like, how do I feel this and this at the same time? And where can I find more tracks like that? It really was like a northern star for me in this progressive music. I was like, that's it.
Nothing sounds like Echomen. It's just, oh my God, it's so rich.
Thanks, man. Yeah. Thanks very much. But then again, if we go back to the production thing, if you put it out, if I play it in sets now, I've got to boost the bass and I've got to boost the tops because of the digital stuff around it. However, at the time, it fit into so many people's consciousness. That's why it just was everywhere. Everywhere we went, it was being played and stuff, and we were like, oh my God. And then you go to Russia and places like that, and everyone's singing along, and you're just like blown away.
It's the bass line and just the groove. Like you knew as a DJ when to play it. It was like that, not at the peak time, but like almost near the end, where you just want to take that soulful song that just will make everybody lose their hearts. Then it just connect. It was amazing.
Well, that's lovely to hear, and I thank you for that.
Oh, thank you.
Well, when you're in the studio, you're kind of thinking, well, where can I take this that isn't the same as something else that I've heard, and that was it. I think the first Echomen thing we did with a vocal on was a track called "Through to You," and we did it for Hooch Tunes, and Jerry, who owned Hooch Tunes, was very specific, and he used to get you to change stuff all the time. And I had the synth line in going bow, bow, ba da bow, and I'm down, 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 down. Another synth from a Jupiter 6, and I was playing this melody with that. And he said, "Can you turn that into a vocal?" And Anton said, "Well, Cheb Grimm, who plays keys in this jazz funk band and stuff, why don't we get him to sing?" And I was like, okay. So I turned those synth line melodies into a vocal just with those simple words, and that's what sort of kicked it off. That was obviously before Perpetual. And, doing that, going through that process in the studio, I think, it's kind of like putting a jigsaw. I know it's a cliche, but it's kind of like putting a jigsaw puzzle together and thinking, well, what can I do? What can I do to make this better? And, sometimes vocals are the answer and sometimes they're not, but in those two instances, vocals were the answer. Yeah.
It's a great track. It's a really great track, Chris. I love Echomen, like tracks like Orient and
Orient was our first ever one. Yeah, 2000.
Well, the other thing that I was talking to Will the other day is that how is it that we got like somebody like Danny Howells, right? Like that it was emerging at that point in life. And suddenly when he gets like this big opportunity, like the New Breed opportunity, like Global Underground was at that time was like huge. And the thing that he said was like, you know what? I'm going to get Chris Scott to open the door for me. Like, Chris, like, take me there. Like, give me this. He played like 4 or 5 tracks.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that New Breed album.
There's 4 of mine on Danny's New Breed. Someone told me a statistic. I'm not sure if it's true, but I'm the producer with the most tracks on Global Underground compilation.
That's awesome.
I don't know if that's true or not. That's questionable. Someone else told me that. And I haven't done the stats, you know. I mean, we monitored obviously what was going on with forensic tracks that were licensed there. But when we did remixes for other people, you know, for other labels, you don't really monitor what's going on with the compilation stuff. And this is kind of embarrassing, but it's only like 4 years ago that I found out that on John Digweed's GU, he had our remix of Medway, My Release.
Yeah.
I only found that out 4 years ago.
My God. I still remember like, My Release. Oh my God, it's fantastic. That is a fantastic remix.
Yeah, well, Jesse's a good friend now. I never spoke to him until about 3 years ago. Our paths never crossed. But he's such a cool guy. Originally from the States and living in the UK now. Just such a cool guy, and he's put some amazing tracks together. But yeah, at the time, the Global Underground stuff, you know, it was based in Newcastle, and so it was very close to us. But that wasn't the reason that we got picked by, you know, Danny. I mean, there was the 2 projects on there. There was the Lexicon and the Echomen stuff on Danny's thing, and I was just like, I got sent this CD, and I was like, hang on, like 4 of these tracks are mine, you know, or ours. And it didn't, because you were working on the next thing, it didn't really sink in so much at the time, you know, and then now people tell you that, you know, it's part of the progressive history and stuff like this. But at the time, I'll remember the story for the rest of my life. I was working, so I live in this little town south of Durham, which is south of Newcastle. And, you know, we'd been over to work with Satoshi Tomy in his place in New York. And he'd come over to Bishop Auckland, this tiny little town in like an old mining town. And people, you know, who were into progressive, they'd spot him. They were writing into DJ magazines. They had this feature saying DJ spot, and someone had spotted him in a McDonald's in Bishop Auckland with Lexicon Avenue, and stuff like that was happening. I'll never forget. We were working in the studio at my house, which is like the basement in my old house, and Satoshi got offered his New Breed while he was at my house. And James, who was wild, James, who was the partner in at the time in Global Underground, came up the street, and I lived on a bank which was like that, and he had a rear-wheel drive Porsche, and it was icy. There was snow everywhere, and he just skidded around the street and bumped into one of my neighbor's cars, you know, and the police arrived and everything. He told me to go and hide his stash. And that was the night that Satoshi got offered his Global Underground. It was at my house, you know.
So it's so cool. I have a question for you, because I'm kind of like I'm really curious. You have such a unique combination of perspectives on how this works, because you're a producer and you're the label boss. What does it look like? Was it always kind of a different story with each track finding its way onto a GU? Or was there kind of like a standard procedure where these tracks would make their ways onto their records. Basically what I'm asking is what is that process like?
Well, the process at the time was, we would send promos out to DJs and they would just use them. And if we held back on the release, because everyone wants an exclusive. I mean, I'm doing a guest mix for Balance next month. Oh, no, in 2 weeks.
That's it. Represent.
Yeah. And there'll be a few of these on.
Yeah.
So you try to get exclusive. So the guys we'd send promos out and they'd say, "Can you hang back on this and we'll use it on a GU?" And but that's with the forensic stuff. But obviously, there was stuff being used on Saw recordings, on Hooch tunes that we'd done. So. Yeah, it just worked that way. We didn't try to work them in there. It wasn't like anyone was pushing them. It was just what they wanted to play, basically. So they were into it. So
if you didn't play the Lexicon Avenue sound, you just didn't play progressive.
Thanks, man.
It was everything, everywhere. It was everywhere.
It was everywhere. It was kind of we had this dark sound. I mean, that. The first thing we did was a very housey, but really fat. It was called Here I Am. And we got this fax from Deep Dish. Fax. Yeah. We got a fax from Deep Dish saying, "Oh my God," I remember it word for word. It was, "Oh my God, Lexicon Avenue, Here I Am, makes me want to die. Because our work sucks compared to this." And we were like, "Fuck off," I can't believe Deep Dish is saying this. So Scott Bradford still has the fax somewhere. So we licensed it to Deep Dish, which was DDR at the time. And then it obviously became Yoshitoshi. And everyone started playing that. And they said, "Look, can you do us a harder version of it?" And Mark, who was in with us at the time, said, "How about we go down this route?" And we kind of made it sort of our own version of Tribal, which was darker and everything, and it worked out. But then we did this thing where, oh my God, we sampled a chant from the beginning of a movie on a track for Forensic. And being naive Northeast England guys, we didn't realize the significance of the actual chant. And it was from the beginning. We used to sample off movies all the time, but it was from the beginning of an Exorcist movie. Anyway, it turned out to be the Islamic call to prayer, which is on midnight on West 27th, which is on Danny's Newbury.
Which everybody played, of course.
Yeah, everybody played, but we had no idea the significance of it because there wasn't any of those communities in our area where we would hear that and know what the significance was. So I tried to, sort of bury that track because, it caused a lot of issues at the time. And I can't believe people didn't learn from that lesson because other people have tried to use that in tracks or in DJ live sets and got themselves into a lot of trouble.
I've seen that go down. Yeah.
Yeah. But that's, that was the naivety of youth and the predominantly, non-Muslim area that we were from. And I've apologized, but I've had guys from Pakistan get in touch with me recently and say, I think it's beautiful that you used it in a track like that. And they play it, whereas others take offense to it, the hard line. So, wow, I can't believe I touched on that subject. I usually try to. You're very
respectful of the issue. It's class, bro. Yeah,
totally. No. What I really think about the track is that whenever I hear it, because it's never, you never hear it at the beginning of it. So you hear it when it's gonna get serious. Like, okay, here it is.
Yeah.
And it just sounds so majestic. It just lightens up, and everybody's like deep into it. It's so, so but the groove is just.
I could never play it again, and I can only when I talk about the track, I can only focus on my naivety about using that sample and not realizing the significance to certain people. So, it's a yin and yang thing about that track. It's kind of like, it was a good thing, but also it was potentially offending thing. And so I try not to, I brought it up. I know I did, but
that's okay.
Yeah. But, you know, I was worried for a long time after that when I was informed about the significance of it and our inability to recognize that even though it was part of the movie, to use it in a record was probably the wrong thing to do. So, but you know, it's out there on the Global Underground CD that you can buy.
And then I think Steve Lawler played it in the movie.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like, and that one went really big.
Yeah. So we had that period, and then you know we you know, after that everything. I think mainly after we did Depeche Mode, Only When I Lose Myself.
Oh, that's what I was going to ask about. My God, that bass line.
Well, that's the thing we were trying to come up with, and I was in the studio. I was trying to work out the best notes to go to fit around the whole vocal, and they were dead simple. But I was using I had the Jupiter 6 on, and I was using like, instead, because at the time we were doing like dum 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 rhythmic ones. Mm-hmm. But to work out the notes that work best, I was just using a sustained note, like boom, 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 boom. That thing.
Yeah, go to reset.
And we were like, this sounds great just like that. Why do we need to cut it up into a rhythmic thing? Let's just keep it like that, you know? And that's how it sort of developed. But we had a massive long intro before that bass hit in. And the only thing, because it was Depeche Mode, we had the a cappella. We couldn't release it commercially, and we gave it to like 50 at that year's Miami Winter Music Conference. We gave it to like 50 key DJs on CD, and it went huge. But then one of the recordings of it one of the CDs got into the wrong hands, and someone bootlegged it to vinyl and made an absolute fortune out of it. They made like so much money. They sold so many.
Everybody played that track.
There were people bootlegging the bootleg as well. So there's so many different vinyl versions of it. And we never saw a penny. It was just a promotional thing from our point of view. But on the flip side of that kind of really blew it up for us. So we were traveling everywhere. You know, John Digweed was playing it weekly and every gig. And so was Danny, and, you know, I think it's Sasha.
Yeah, you guys put that bass line in your website. I remember.
Yeah.
Like Into a World. So deep in the bass line. I was like, my God, what is this website?
That was the website intro?
That was the website, dude. It was the bass line and the words from the Lexicon Avenue track. Like
from the other Lexicon Avenue track with the bass line from
exactly that, like Into a World. For your deepest desires, and the haunting bass line. Oh, I can't forget it. I still play it like in my mind, like, dude, that's it.
Yeah. So as even though that sort of the memory of that is tainted, that somebody else kind of made it big out of that track themselves personally, we can't. You know, we try to, you know. Rationalize it by saying, well, look, you know, this got us really international, and so you can't have any complaints when it does that to your career, you know. Even though I would really like to find out who the hell bootlegged it and say, where's my money, mother?
And there's a lot of people that made a lot of money from those kind of white labels. They were called white labels back then.
Yeah,
because they weren't pressed by anybody. It's just there wasn't a label to sign, so it was just like the vinyl was just white.
Yeah, the vinyl. You know, on the run out of a vinyl, you're supposed to have the number of the pressing plant. They were scratched off. So the pressing plants themselves, whoever manufactured those, they were just as culpable as the people who bootlegged it. You know, so. Yeah, but, you know, pressing vinyl now, going back to what you said, pressing vinyl now is so much more expensive because we're looking at doing it. It's the 25th anniversary of Forensic this year, and we're looking at a vinyl box set. And
nice. That will be amazing.
Yeah, very limited run of each track. And the ones we are picking are, now it all depends on me getting the parts, because everything back then was recorded stereo down from all this MIDI equipment, some of which I have, some of which I don't. So it depends on getting the parts, but the vocal parts are very important. So there's going to be a lot of work involved in me recalling the vocal parts, because we weren't working on DAWs like we are now, but we have picked 5 tracks that were forensic tracks, that were classics, that still have, like a demand on Discogs.
Okay.
They will be on one side with Big Name Remixer on the other side. There's a vinyl box set for the 25-year.
Oh my God, that is amazing. That is fantastic.
Thanks. That's the plan. That's the master plan. How we execute it is, at the moment it's still in flux. Let's say.
No, I can imagine that because you're like remastering these tracks, and it gets like
it's more to do with getting the parts. So it's actually getting the vocals that we use, because as I say, everything was like, I have like 2 Akais here, and neither of them will fire up. And that's what I used to, so whenever I used to record a vocal, I used to record it down to a digital, and then I used to put the parts into the Akais. I used to split them up and put them into the Akais, and they're not working at the moment. So it's going to be a really difficult process to try and get those parts. But, we've already got like 3 guys on board, 3 nice guys on board. So we've got Lexicon Avenue Dusk Till Dawn planned, with a remixer on the other side, which will be like 2 guys who everyone knows. We have a target for 1 guy for Echomen Substance, which we haven't confirmed yet, but we have a target remixer for that. We have agreed Little Green Men Need Satoshi Tomi remix on one side, Denox and Becker's on the other.
Cool.
And we have another couple of names like who have agreed to these things, but it's getting the parts to them, and it's the lead-in times. The reason it was so competitive and so cheap to manufacture vinyl back 20 years ago was there was so many pressing plants around. After after digital took over, downloads and streaming, all these pressing plants went out of business. So now they're coming back into business, but they're like a cottage industry. They're a small industry. So the costs are through the roof, where they used to be very competitive. So it's like it costs 5 times as much now to press a vinyl than it did 20 years ago.
I can imagine. Yeah.
Can I ask you something about forensic?
Yeah.
One question I have is, like, you had all these productions. What inspired you? Ruben was taking me through your discography, and we saw all the aliases. Now, from the start, like, what inspired you to go out, not only on top of all the work that goes into producing tracks, but set up a record label, your own record label, rather than maybe forming a relationship with a pre-existing one that would kind of be your creative outlet?
Yeah, I mean, that's a really good question. What was happening was that we were getting more and more labels who were taking our stuff, from sort of 93, with the stuff that I was collaborating on, from 93 to sort of 97. And they were just getting scattered everywhere. We had stuff on Junior Boys On Limbo, and all these other labels. And we were like, we're putting this everywhere, but we have no control over it. And we can't say what's happening with the tracks once they've gone. And we're making enough material, and we have people who are digging our stuff, who obviously like to contribute. Why don't we just do it ourselves, and just keep total control over it? So we know what's getting manufactured. We know, it's not sketchy when it comes to transparency about how many we're selling and things like that, So we thought, let's just do it ourselves. So that's kind of how it happened. So we all had a meeting, we had a dinner, and said, yeah, let's do it. And Bill Brewster, who's like a famous sort of house music commentator and author, He was part of the original lineup of the thing, and that's where Forensic Records came from. He actually came up with Little Grey Men for one of our project names, you know.
Nice.
And I think he said like Forensic Records, and the tagline at the time, because in 97, 98 we were doing Deep House, was Deep House from the Deep North.
That's sick. That is sick.
And that's what he came with, because he's a creative writer, you know. So he came up with that sort of stuff and was involved for a few years, and then, you know, we went more and more progressive, and wasn't his bag, and we kind of bought his shares out, and then we kind of whittled it down, and yeah, we just went about it. It was just like, you know, you look back now and people tell you, oh, this was amazing for me, and that was great for me, and I loved this record. And at the time, it was just work for us, you know. It was like, yeah. You know, so
what's the next thing? What's the next thing?
yeah, exactly. In the studio, right? That's that remix done. What's next? Come on, and you know, we do that and do our next track. You know, at the same time, we didn't lose sight of the sort of the creative side of it. We always pushed each other to be better in each production, but you know, we had a heavy schedule. It was like we've got a deadline for this remix, and we're like going to Tokyo next week, so you know we have to finish it. So it kind of became, you know, anything, any line of work with a level of repetition becomes work, you know. Even though you know, but we were in so much of a flow back then. Can you see me?
Yeah, you're good, man.
Yeah. My phone just gave me that low battery thing. Let me just plug this in. Yeah, so everything just became a thing where we, you have a day, right? We've got this day to work on the track. We have to get it done because we're traveling on Thursday. It's Tuesday. We need to finish this, because if we don't finish this, we'll have to do it when we get back. That will miss the deadline. So it became like a schedule of work and stuff. And it didn't ever fuck with the. Excuse me. It didn't ever mess with the. It didn't ever mess with the creativity side of it. You know, it just it seemed to work. Everything seemed to just fall into place every time. I don't know how. I don't know how.
Sometimes kind of a deadline just like lights a fire a little bit. Not like a harsh deadline, but like you got to get shit done.
Yeah, that's it.
Hey, Chris, and exactly. On tracks like the remix for Breed for Danny Howells, like what was the inspiration behind that? Because it's kind of like a really vocal vibey house, but with the Lexicon Avenue deep.
Yeah. Normally when I get a vocal track to remix, I much prefer working with vocals. And when I do get a vocal track to remix, I ignore everything else that isn't the vocal and just build a track around the vocal that's my own, you know, for a remix. And obviously Danny was playing our stuff, and to get that from him and hearing a re-remix. Now, in my commercial years, when I was working for Warner Brothers, I'd actually worked with a Riri prior to that on a track. So I knew her voice, and I was just like, Danny's track's great. We've got to give him something completely different so that we complement it, you know? And yeah, we just, you know, we had this thing where we would tame each other. Like, you know, Mark would be good at saying, no, don't bring that in yet. Don't bring that in yet. Whereas I would be, you know, like, look at this, I'm going to tune this percussion to the track. Go on then. And it would take ages. And then we'd just like, right, we need this effect. And Scott would be like, yeah, we need some melody in here. We need some, and it would just bounce off each other like that. And it was hard work, you know, it was, as well as being a beautiful thing, it would be, because you're working with all these live MIDI stuff, you know, that's another part of wanting to finish a track, because if you didn't finish it, you would have to try and recall it because you work on another project. Like say if I have to go in and recall manually all the analog synths, all the mixer settings and stuff. And it was just a nightmare. Never say if you didn't finish a track and you went back to the one you were working on with it all being in MIDI and all these outboard MIDI devices, you know, it never sounded the same when you went back. You know? So you wanted to get it finished, and I think we did that in like 2 or 3 days of intense work. The Danny Howells remix.
I still play that track. It's amazing.
I love that track. You know, the one thing about that track was in that transitional period where I was still using an Akai MPC, and some of the timing on it, you know, it drifts.
I had to edit it. Yeah.
Yeah, you have to push. You have to push and pull that vinyl because it drifts. It drifts.
Yeah, and it was a challenge back then. Yeah.
Yeah. That's down to the technology back then. That's not on me. That's down to the Akai.
Blame those guys. Yeah, because precisely that's what I remembered about it. Like, oh my God, fighting with the pitch. Like, my God, what is this?
Yeah. What happened? You know, at the time I had to sort of MIDI clock it to Cubase, but the MPC just had this. Even though it was all digital anyway, it just had this sound and this groove that was great. But when you MIDI clocked it to your sequencer, is what we called them before DAWs. When you MIDI clocked it to that, it would drift in and out of time, you know? So it was like, it was a headache for me when I heard it afterwards. Because when you hear it in the studio, it's okay because everything syncs up within itself. But like as a complete work, it would, you know, slow up and speed down ever so fractionally. So yeah, that was the technology of the time. So sorry for everyone who.
I'll take that. Sorry.
I'm apologizing to anyone who played that track where it drifted out of time. Yeah. Blame Akai, don't blame me.
That's so funny.
Yeah. So that's kind of the story of it all.
Yeah, no, that's awesome.
Every now and then I go into YouTube and just type Lexicon Avenue and you just see like, oh my God, it's a walk through time. It's amazing.
Yeah, I think, you know, whoever posted there's one of the posts. I mean, there's several posts of Only When I Lose Myself. One of them's got like 1.8 million hits or something.
Yeah, it's big.
But some of them have like, you know, you get a couple with 100,000 and stuff like that. You know, several people have posted it. I wish I'd had the hindsight to do it myself, but you know. But you know, you just.
But I thought that at that point, I thought that maybe you guys because internet was limited. Like there's no social media like today. Somebody said at some point, like, no, they got into trouble with the pitch mode and now they have to do like a remix as punishment. And everybody was like, what? Like,
well, actually, no. I mean, the story is that Paul Oakenfold played our remix to Dave Garn of Only When I Lose Myself.
Okay.
And Dave was planning. So a couple of years later, Dave was already planning like a solo album. And he asked us personally to do the first single from it, which was Dirty Sticky Floors. Yeah.
Really nice track. Remix, yeah.
So we did that. And, you know, so that remix, yeah, as I said before, it like opened a lot of doors for us. So, yeah. So we can't complain.
Very, very, very good stories. It's amazing. Amazing, man. I'm just like a groupie fan over here. I'm like,
come on. But you know, you don't think about it like that when you're doing it, you know, day in, day out. You kind of lose track about what other people, you know, you always have in mind when you're creating, you know, God, I hope people like this. And you try your hardest to make something that people will connect with. But you never kind of, at the time, think, people are going to contact you, you know, 10, 20 years down the line and say, wow, you know, this was a thing that, you know, I had people tell me that Substance by Echomen kind of changed their view on house music and stuff, like quite a few people. And I'm like, really? And, you know, some of the South American guys get in touch and say Echomen, it's like, it kind of shaped me as a producer and stuff. I'm not going to name names, but a few people have contacted me about that. So, and that means a great deal to me, because I see these people now and I listen to what they're doing and I just think, wow, this shit is mind blowing, and so to be a part of their journey, and for them to, look back at things that I've done, it makes you feel good.
That's the thing is that we listened to those tracks at that time and said, this is mind blowing. Exactly.
People making the best memories of their lives to your music. That's insane.
When I play still, when it comes to that point, I'm still looking at my USB drive. Like I need a perpetual track. Like where is my perpetual track here? Like something like that. I see it. I see it in the groups. Ruben, you see it too. It's like the Lexicon Avenue and Echomen following is like serious in terms of how much the fans love the music. It's like from someone who didn't live through it, it's like cultish. I'm like, this is epic. These people like love this specific style of music. It's awesome.
You've made me day. You've made my month, actually. I know we're only early in the month, but you've made my month. No, I mean it's nice. It's lovely to talk about, and I'm so grateful that you give me the chance to talk about it. We have some really good new shit coming as well, though.
Yes, dude.
So please tell us about the future.
Yeah.
What's coming?
What's going on?
Oh, well, what I told you about the 25th year anniversary, but we've also, got some really, who I think have had, until the tracks are in the bag. I don't want to say too much, but like the people who I kind of really admire now, who want to get involved with forensic, it's just like, yeah, this is going to be excellent. So really positive about that. Plus, I'm some labels that I play that I think are fantastic. I've been approached for remixes for. So everything over this last 2 years, and I'm kind of thankful for lockdown for this, If it hadn't been for lockdown, I kind of wouldn't have sorted a few personal things out, and I also wouldn't have really focused on, what do I need to do with my life again and reboot forensic, and it's going better than I could have expected, and touch wood, or touch something that used to wood. I'm we're going in the right direction, and a lot of people who are into the classic progressive stuff are contacting me and saying, yeah, you are going in the right direction with this, and that's good, because we kind of keep we're trying to push forward and be current as well, and as well as like put our own creative side of it, but also try and keep the people who support us from the start happy with the output that we're putting out there. So yeah, I mean, it's exciting times, it's really exciting times.
Go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, no, I'm just, when the people I've been speaking to over this last year and stuff, who are, digging what we're trying to do and what we are doing, and approaching me personally for remixes and new material, it's kind of validating, it makes it feel like it was a worthwhile endeavor, that we did restart it,
Yeah. Well, I'm so stoked for you that you get to drive positive energy from everything, that you've put into your music career. Because I know it can be, difficult for all artists as time passes and we all go through different phases. But to see forensic and to see like this music be a positive source of energy for you and something you're stoked about in 2023 is awesome. It's like I get excited when it's not something you're running away from. It's like, no, you're leaning into it. This is like my life's work.
Yeah, and I have to mention here, the support that I've gotten from people who have been, and there's one guy in particular who's been in the scene for a long time, and he's been such an inspiration for, like, remotely, but we have done a collaboration together, and his latest track on his last remix on Forensic, we've got videos of it there with John Digweed playing it and Nick Warren playing it and stuff. And Dave Walker, as we kind of send each other stuff when we sort of in the early stages of production and say, well, what about it? Look, the EQs and we everything that don't over compress this bit, and we're doing this backwards and forwards, and having someone like that on your team, it's just who's doing it for the passion as well. It's just great, and I feel like we have a team. Even like there's the director, there's the three directors, there's us who want this to be a key thing, and we're making tracks together and stuff. But there's also like there's the fans from the original era and new people who are coming on board, and they're just pushing our stuff on socials, just taking their own time to do it. And that sort of stuff, it's invaluable. It's like, how do we deserve this kind of support from people? And it just makes you feel, again,
it's a lot of great work. It's a whole body of work. It's amazing. Thank you.
We have like a forensic family thing going on, where everyone's like sharing and and joining in group discussions and chats and pushing
like a Facebook group.
Oh yeah.
Oh, sick. Yeah, it's called Forensic Family. No, I just know everybody's going to want to check this out.
No, we've got the Forensic Family. We've got the Forensic Records group, and we've got the Forensic Records fan page. The group itself, although I haven't been able to interact as much lately, when that started off, when everyone from the old fans and stuff, there's a lot of interaction on there. If you look back at some of the earlier posts from like 2 years ago, it's just crazy conversation, just like real fun. It's become a bit more promotional now, which I don't want. I want to be able to interact more, but I'm getting more and more busy. It's like crazy. It's but we still have that sort of family vibe to it. It's great. So Forensic Records, the group, and then there's Forensic Records, the fan page, and yeah, I can give you the links and you can post them with this video if you like.
Yeah, of course.
Hell yeah.
Please do. Yeah.
Yeah. Excellent.
Chris, I think that if you're going to inject into this new phase of your life, the same passion and love that you injected at that time, it's going to be amazing. And I'm pretty sure that you're going to print us all again with that Chris Scott sound.
I hope so, man.
I'll be really, really looking forward for it. Trust me.
Thank you so much. 30 years of doing it, I never thought I'd get this kind of passion back, but it's back. I'm stoked about everything that's going on at the moment.
That is
yeah, bro.
And thank you. Thank you for involving me with it. This is all part of it.
No, definitely. And I think, this has been such an awesome conversation. Thank you. And I think an appropriate question to end with, and Ruben and I had kind of been going back and forth, like because we're trying to think of like a good final question for different interviews. And our question to you is, after everything we talked about, Super Progressive covers the history of progressive house, but what is progressive to you?
Yeah. Well, to me, and I mean this with the greatest respect to other people who are into other forms of house music, with the greatest respect, because, I'm 52 now, and a lot of the people who I raved with, they much prefer, if they do, they've raved, then they've had a family, then the family's grown up, and now they're getting back into, I quite fancy, I quite want to go out and party again. But all I want to hear is the old stuff. Whereas progressive, to me, I think it's fundamental to house music in itself. I mean, the term in itself is fundamental to house music. I mean, you know, from Larry Levan mixing disco records with a drum machine to where it is, you know, there was never a point where it stopped and stayed the same, you know? And I think when you have the right people around you with the right like-minded people, you know, everyone sort of builds upon things. And this is what we've already touched on. I think that's what all of house music should be about. It should be about and I've said this before. House music isn't just a genre. It's a movement. House music is a movement. You've seen it go from those gay clubs in New York and Chicago, and just spread across the world. And it became a movement, not by staying in the same place. And I think, you know, more than anything, progressive house, even though it's had like certain periods of slumps where people have got into other genres and stuff like that, I think it's the one thing that remains. And I think that's, you know, being part of a movement means that you move on and you push yourself to make something new, make something that is progressive, that doesn't stay the same, that moves all the time, that's constantly pushing itself forward. And I think that's happening. I think that's happening with, you know, you got your South American sound and you've got European sound and North American sound, you know, that everyone is trying to move the thing forward. And it's not forced. It's a natural thing because everyone wants to, you know, be better or make something that makes people go, wow, I haven't heard that before. And I think that's always got to be a part of it, as fundamentally. Yeah.
Awesome. It's like,
very good.
Yeah, it's just much like what I've been learning about progressive is it's so not just a genre of music, and you can really attribute progressive to really so much stuff. It's like your approach to the music, your approach to track selection, your approach to the arrangement. And then when it starts to expand beyond the music into like life things, I'm like, yeah, this is touching my life in a way that I never could have anticipated. But it's like how I view the world now. It's really cool.
Yeah. I'm so happy about that. And you know, and you know what, William? It's great to see. I mean, I played a gig. I played a couple of gigs recently where I haven't said that, like in the UK, that you haven't seen before in the UK for a long time, where younger people are going. Now, younger people go in South America, younger people are starting to go in North America and Israel and places like that. But in the UK, it's like the progressive scene has always stayed like the older crowd, where now, you know, I'm starting to see younger people sort of go, yeah, I like this music. And that is really encouraging for the UK scene moving forward. And, you know, the fact that you just said that and that it means that to you, you know, and we can have a whole new generation, that's really, that's just something, you know, it's a fantastic thing. I love it.
I'm so stoked, bro. But all I can say is thank you so much for coming on, Ruben, bro.
Thank you for having me.
Ruben, I am so stoked you're on this podcast, bro. This was the best flowing conversation. Like this is gonna be great, Chris, dude. This was such a treat. So awesome.
Well, and yeah, man, I'm a fan over here. I'm a groupie here.
Thanks, man.